So we just heard from Kate Green there as saying that Labour want to see this 2 to 3 weeks circuit breaker to give us some breathing space to get on top of test and trace. People want to know, is that going to happen?
No.
Absolutely not.
Well, I've just listened to Kate and I've got a great respect for her. But what she completely failed to answer is the reason why we should have restrictions in parts of the country where the infection rate is low, when what we need to do is to make sure that in those areas where the infection rate is high, that we protect people from reinfection. Sadly, the case in the northwest is that the number of people who are catching the disease, the number of people who are going into hospital, the number of people who tragically are dying has been increasing. We need to take steps there. The Mayor of Liverpool, Joe Anderson, the Liverpool, Merseyside City Region Mayor Steve Rotherham, the leaders of Lancashire Council, they've all recognised that. They've accepted these restrictions and they've also worked with central government in order to make sure that there is a package of support. And I think that's right. But it would seem to me to be an error to try to impose on every part of the country the same level of restriction when we know that the disease is spreading more intensively and quicker in some parts of the country. The nature of the epidemiology, the scientific word for the spread of the disease, is different in this wave than it was earlier in the year.
So just to be clear, are you saying that you're ruling it out now or you're ruling it out at any point?
Well, we always look at how the disease spreads and we'll take whatever steps are necessary to maintain public health. But Kate and the Labour Party are arguing for blanket restrictions across the country at the moment, and the spread and the nature of the disease does not merit that approach at the moment.
Okay.
And it would seem to me to be wrong to impose restrictions on the economic and personal life of individuals in parts of the country where the disease is not spreading so intensively. And one of the things, I have enormous respect for Kate, but one of the things that many people will wonder is, why did Labour argue for this week? Kate, in a different context, had said that the Labour Party should regard the coronavirus epidemic as a good crisis, which should not go to waste.
Something that she's apologised for, she's ashamed of, and we've gone over the
I understand that, and as I say, I've got great respect for Kate. But Keir Starmer seems to me to be someone who, his political career seems to be built on shifting sands, taking a position whenever it suits him. And many people will ask, why is it that he's calling for this lockdown now, when his own mayor in Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, is fighting against these measures?
Okay.
Many people would say that if Labour are serious about the NHS and about this disease, then Keir would be calling on Andy Burnham and inviting Andy Burnham to accept the need for these measures.
We've talked about Labour there. Let's talk about the government and the government's response. Because the counter-argument is that if you act swiftly and decisively, then further action later down the line won't be necessary. I just want to have a look at what Sir Patrick Vallance, the Chief Scientific Advisor, said on Friday. He said, it is important to go quite fast on this. It's important to make sure that you go hard enough to get the R below 1. The sooner you do that, the more you get this under control. For many, the lesson of the first lockdown was that we didn't act fast enough, we did it. And as a result, we had to lock down longer and for harder. Are we making the same mistake now?
Well, they're making that mistake in Manchester, yes, because it's perfectly clear from the response, the right response, from the Mayor of Liverpool and local government leaders in Lancashire. They recognise there's a particular situation in the northwest that requires action. But in Greater Manchester, sadly, those steps have not yet been taken. So we're ready to do everything we can, whatever it takes,
are you ready to
help people in Manchester.
Saying you're ready to do everything it takes, does that mean you are willing to impose greater restrictions on Greater Manchester, even if Andy Burnham resists?
Well, one of the reasons why we've been talking to local government leaders is that we believe that a partnership approach is best. We could have imposed measures before now, but we've talked to...
But are you ready to do it in the future?
Well, we want to reach an agreement, but the real question is for the civic, political leadership, political actually is a better word, the political leadership in Greater Manchester, are you ready to impose restrictions if the political leadership in Greater Manchester continues to resist? Well, I want to give them the opportunity. I want to be fair to them to recognise that this is a public health crisis. and that there are...
Very straightforward question, though. Are you ready to impose if they continue to resist?
It's a question in a context, and the context is this, that I want to reach an agreement with the political leadership in Greater Manchester. I want them to put aside for a moment some of the political positioning that they've indulged in, and I want them to work with us in order to ensure that we save lives and protect the NHS. Because an absence of action will mean, and Sir Patrick is absolutely right, an absence of action will mean more people get infected. As more people get infected, that will place more pressure on the NHS. And the more people, sadly, in intensive care beds in the North West and in Manchester who are suffering from coronavirus, the fewer intensive care beds are there for people with other serious conditions. All this is happening as we move closer to the winter. And instead of, press conferences and posturing, what we need is action to save people's lives.
You're very critical there. Press conferences, posturing, being politically indulgent. You're very critical there of some of the political leaders in the regions, including Greater Manchester.
Well, I think there's a contrast.
At the same time, let me finish my question, if you will. Thank you.
Well, I'll respond to your point because I think there's a clear difference between the approach that's been taken in Liverpool and in Lancashire.
You've made that point already.
And these are civic leaders
but at the same
stepping
time,
up to the plate.
You've been very critical of, reading between the lines, Andy Burnham, and yet you can understand his perspective. People in the city that he represents have been under restrictions for 11 weeks. They haven't worked. Cases are still going up. It's been incredibly difficult for people to have to make these sacrifices. You're asking them to basically swallow further restrictions that even your own scientific advisors have questioned whether there'll be enough to bring the virus under control. And if they are unable to work, they only get 2/3 of their salaries. Is that really a fair way to treat people in Greater Manchester? And can you not understand why some of the political leaders might be trying to stand up and asking for more from the government for the people that they represent?
Well, let's take each of those steps. Where is the scientific evidence? Where are the scientific voices saying that it's wrong to have these additional restrictions in Manchester? I haven't heard them. The fact is that whether it's Sir Patrick Vallance, Chris Whitty, or others, people recognise that when you have a high rate of virus infection, you need additional restrictions.
But they are saying Tier 3, I'm reading from Patrick Vallance here, Tier 3 baseline conditions on their own almost certainly aren't enough to get the R below 1. So they're saying that the Tier 3 won't even work?
No. Well, they are saying that Tier 3 plus local measures will work. The reason that we're talking to the political leadership in Manchester is that we're saying we want additional measures. You know that they will work. Let's work together, as we have in other parts of the North West, to do that. The political leadership in Greater Manchester is resisting precisely the programme that will bring the virus down. Now, you asked quite rightly, of course, about the economic support package as well. The economic support package that we've negotiated with other parts of the North West is there in order to help individuals and to help businesses. And the money that we're providing is more generous than comparable schemes in comparable European countries. And I don't think anyone underestimates the scale of concern that we all have about this, but it is better for the economy, as you yourself pointed out earlier, that we act quickly. If we don't act quickly to deal with the spread of the virus, then it's not just the health, it's also that the economic consequences are worse. So it's a false argument to say that time spent resisting these measures is somehow fighting for Greater Manchester's economy, for jobs and livelihoods. It's not. It is time wasted when we should be taking the appropriate measures to protect public health. Because the government's actions here are driven by an overwhelming desire to make sure that we save lives in Greater Manchester and elsewhere. And that's why the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Health Secretary, have been, the Community Secretary, have been engaging in this process because we want to help. And in Liverpool, again, there have been some tough decisions that the mayor there and the Metro Mayor have had to swallow, but they've done the right thing. And we should recognise that. And we should, people like Joe Anderson in Liverpool deserve our thanks and credit.
Who you've spoken about before. I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Restrictions only work if people follow the rules.
Yes.
And I notice that police are going to be giving details of people told to self-isolate. I mean, it seems that that is a pretty obvious admission that there are people who are not obeying the rules. What do your figures on compliance show?
Well, it is the case, sadly, and again, it varies, that there has been a problem with compliance and a challenge on enforcement. But again, some of the steps that we've taken have been designed to help with that.
So what do the figures show? Because you must have figures on compliance. Why aren't you sharing them with us?
Well, I think, again, there are local figures and it varies from area to area. But
so just give us a few examples then. What do they show?
Well, one of the things they show is that there have been cases, legitimate cases, where people have felt that not complying would cause them some economic hardship. And to be fair to the local leaders across the United Kingdom, including the Scottish Government, they made the case, and we absolutely agreed, that providing financial support for people who had to self-isolate was appropriate.
So
and this is an example.
Why don't you...
This is an example.
Genuinely interested. Why are you not releasing the figures on compliance?
Well, again, some of these figures depend on what's happening between the police and what's happening between individuals.
Is it because you're worried that people look at them and think, wow, that's really low, I'm not going to bother following the rules either?
No. Because I think most of us recognise that it is a good idea to follow the rules, but we're ready to support. And again, you know, one of the points that I think it's important to recognise is where you've got political leaders with whom I might disagree, like Nicola Sturgeon or Mark Drakeford, who appreciate the pressure on the NHS. They're doing everything they can in order to try to ensure that the rules are enforced. And, you know, Nicola recognises in Scotland that you need slightly different rules in Glasgow than you do in the Highlands. But she also has worked with us in order to provide an economic support package.
Could there be more money available to try and make sure people do self-isolate?
Well, we're always keeping under review the support package that we need. One of the reasons...
So, yes, there could potentially be then...
one of the things, again, you can quite rightly run through a variety of different areas where perhaps potential financial support might be helpful. But my view is that the best way of doing that is to work with other civic leaders in different parts of the country to analyse what might be required. That's what we've always done. That's what we will continue to do. But again, we can only provide that support if we keep a balanced approach, and we also recognise that in those parts of the country where we don't need restrictions, economic life should continue as close to normal as possible.
Very quickly, because I'm keen to talk to you a bit about Brexit as well. Tony Blair has been accused of breaching the self-isolation rules after returning from abroad. Now, a spokesperson said, "We believe he followed all the guidelines as advised. He was not refused exemption by the UK government." Are you going to be looking into this?
Not me personally, no. I'm sure that there will be people who will scrutinise what happened, but...
Do you think it's right for people to have a look to see if he did obey the rules?
I think it's right for everyone to have a look, but all I would say is that while there are many things that Tony Blair did that I disagreed with, he's played a distinguished role in helping to bring peace to parts of the Middle East recently, and so I shan't be criticising him until there is strong evidence that merits it. OK.
Now, I want to talk about Brexit, because earlier this month you said that there was a 66% chance a trade deal would be struck with the EU. What do you put the chances at now?
Less.
How much less? Less than 50%?
Well, I think it's less. I can't be precise, but one of the reasons why it's less is the position that's been taken in the last couple of weeks by European Union leaders. What we've seen and what our negotiators have found is that the European Union side have not been willing to produce the detailed legal text. They've not been willing to intensify the talks in a way that would indicate that they were actually serious about reaching agreement. And at the same time, they've also insisted both that we accept a level of control over our autonomy that an independent country can't really accept. And at the same time, they're saying that they should continue to have exactly the same access to, for example, our fishing waters and our fishing stocks as before. And so, you know, that seems to me to be the behaviour of an organisation and an institution that is not serious about making the compromises necessary to secure a deal. I still hope we'll get a deal, though. So
are the talks still happening? What's going on? Is Michel Barnier going to be coming next week? We've been having the talks?
Well, the ball's in his court. We've made clear that we needed to see a change in approach from the European Union. I know that he'll be calling David Frost over the course of the next few days. Let's see if the European Union appreciate the importance of reaching a deal and the importance of moving ground.
I mean, it's pretty clear that you feel that they need to move further, but we do have to look at the impact that not reaching a trade deal could have on the United Kingdom. As you yourself have said, it's going to be quite considerable. Reasonable worst-case scenario. Without more preparation, there could be queues of up to 7,000 lorries in Kent. Are we really willing to risk that over fishing, which is clearly a very, very important thing for a lot of people, but it represents, what, 0.12% of the economy?
Well, again, two things I'd say. The first thing about publishing the reasonable worst-case scenario is that we published it in order to show what would happen if we weren't fully prepared. Since then, government has been doing more, but in particular...
So what, there might be 6,000 lorries in Kent instead?
No, in particular, business has been doing a great deal more. There have been fantastic business leaders, from Richard Burnett, the leader of the Road Haulage Association...
Although less than a month ago you said less than a quarter of businesses were fully ready.
Yeah, to Adam Marshall at the British Chambers of Commerce, who have been, and Carolyn Fairbairn of the CBI, who've been working with us to help businesses to get ready. And again, one of the things about businesses being ready for an Australia-style departure is that businesses, if they take those...
Australia-style leaving without a deal. Let's call a spade a spade. That's what it is. Australia doesn't have a...
We're leaving without a free trade agreement. But we have a deal. We have a withdrawal agreement. One of the reasons why that's important is that it settles the rights of UK citizens and so on. But to cut to the quick, whatever outcome we get in these negotiations, there are levels of preparation that we need to make because we're going to be outside the customs union and outside the single market. And taking those preparations also enable businesses to take advantage of the new trade deals that we're concluding, like the trade deal that Liz Truss has concluded with Japan, that gives us better access to the world's third largest economy than we did when we were in the EU.
The thing is, it's going to be quite hard, isn't it, to separate the economic disruption caused by COVID-19 and any further economic disruption caused by leaving the transition period without a trade deal. You know, a cynic would say that it almost gives you cover to play tough and go for no deal.
No. I want a deal. I'm keen to conclude one. But it takes both sides to compromise in order for there to be one. The EU side is not doing so at the moment. And if the choice is between accepting a deal in which our hands are tied and we don't have control over our own waters, or leaving and being clear that we're honouring the mandate that the British people gave us to take back control, then we have to take back control.